you like this video. And again, if there's any other video that you would like me to do, which is related to another past paper, please put the link down below of the past paper and I'll try my best going through it with you guys, making a video and posting it. And please let me know if you like that one as well. So let's get started. So we're on question 11 now. So as you can see, the question is, here are two triangles on a grid. So we have been given two triangles. So triangle B is an enlargement of triangle A. Enlargement basically means that triangle B is an enlargement, meaning enlargement basically means like bigger than triangle A. So enlargement in a form, in a term, could basically mean is the bigger version of triangle A. So if you want to write this down, you're free to write it down. So enlargement, bigger version. You can always mark it down. I'll give you around 30 seconds to note this down because I might be raising it, due to which because I need to write the answers in this space as well. So 30 seconds, please write this down if you want to. This is very important to remember because these questions will be coming up very, very often in your papers. Could be paper 1, 2, or 3. But these questions are super common and can be more than 1 mark, 2 marks. Most of the time they are like 2 markers or 3 markers at max, but sometimes it can be at big marks. Could be a 3-4 marker by itself. So 30 seconds. Okay, so it's 30 seconds now, and if it's taking a little bit longer for you to write, you can always pause this video and write it. So I'm going to erase it now. Okay. So now when we see this question, basically if I repeat this question, two triangles on a grid, triangle B is an enlargement of triangle A. Your first question A, first part, write down the scale factor of the enlargement. Now by scale factor, what do they mean by scale factor? It basically means how much difference or how much times or how much distance did it take between A and B to become different versions of themselves. So like how much time did A take, like how much of changes did A have to make through multiplication, division, subtraction, addition to change into shape B. Now it could be addition, subtraction, but most of the time when they're asking for a scale factor, it will always be multiplication. Here it's rather more simple, so I'm going to just explain you by a very simple logic here. So basically what they're saying is A and B. So what do we do first? We do a simple method. We count the boxes above them, and by boxes I mean these squares. If you can see my dots. So we count these squares. So as we know, when we look at this diagram, when we look at this shape by itself, we know both A and B are similar shape. So we don't have, so unless if it was in a more, unless this triangle was like this, unless triangle B or triangle A was like this, we might want to be looking at different sides because each of them would have a different side and they would not be similar, because if we see here, this would not be equal to this. And then if we see this side would not be equal to this side. We want all the sides to be equal and we want all the sides to be same. So like whenever we are comparing sides with each other, we want this ones to be same as this ones similar to this ones similar to this ones. We want all of them to be the exact same. Okay, so as we know, we've been given a similar shape for now. So for this question, what we really need to do is we need to find a similar side. So we know this side and this side are the same, right? So what do we do here? We simply count the number of squares. So to this line, to this line, how many squares has this taken to make a bigger square? So we simply count the line till the line, so like the squares above it. So basically 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, right? So here we know that there are 6 squares taken in here to make a larger version of the triangle. Now if we look at A, if we count the A triangle, we can clearly see that it has taken only 3 squares, 1, 2, and 3. So we can see the difference that both of them, so this is a 3, so this is a 3, and this is a 6. So when we need to find the scale factor, basically means how much difference did it take. So as we can see, 3 and 6, most commonly we define it as multiplication, because we kind of see the number and we kind of already know that this will be from the 3's times table. So what is really needed here is the multiplication. So we know 3 ones are 3 and 3 into 2 is 6. So when we know 3 into 2 is 6, we basically know that we're multiplying 3 into 2 to get the answer of 6. So when we know what we multiplied it by, that will be our scale factor. Because that's the reason why we got to an answer of 3 to an answer of 6 and therefore got a bigger triangle. So it is very, very simple. This question was quite simple. The questions can be super, super complex. The shapes can be a bit different. It could be a reflection. It won't be necessarily an enlargement. There are very different types of transformations. So it's always important, firstly, to know that which kind of a transformation it is. Then secondly, you can do simple methods like these, or there are a few other methods as well, to find out the scale factor. This was rather simple. So we already know it's an enlargement because it's mentioned here. So as we can see, it's mentioned here. But otherwise, it's important for us to know which one it is. So as soon as you see the question, you think about, okay, which enlargement is this? Oh wait, which transformation is this? Is it an enlargement? Is it a reflection? Then your second question to your mind would be, what is the scale factor? Which basically means the difference of these two. So like how much of what did A have to multiply with to get that big into shape B? As simple as that, in the most simplest of terms you can imagine it. And then you're free to solve, and it can be as simple, it could be so simple that you can earn these marks. You can earn a 1, 2, 3, 4 super easily. And if you're not very familiar with this chapter, please let me know. I can always make a video on enlargements, and then we can always clear this topic out, and we can practice sums together, and then we can always discuss the answers in the end in my next few videos if you want me to do it. So please let me know in the comments. Okay, so this question is done. So we know the second question. Now we're on the second part. On the grid with the cross, the center of enlargement. Right. So what do we basically do here now? Now that we know that on the grid, mark the cross with the center of enlargement. What does the center of enlargement mean? Center of enlargement basically means the midpoint where they change their shapes into a bigger version of themselves. That is the center of enlargement. And when they say enlargement, it is very particularly the meaning that, they're talking about the enlargement which is done here. So if we talk about transformation itself, center of enlargement is not a term for everything. So if we say reflection, if it was a reflection, we can't say what is the center of enlargement. They would probably ask a question like maybe center of reflection. But they would never ask you what is the center of enlargement, because here they're just clearly asking about the enlargement and not the reflection or any other transformation. So we know it's an enlargement. They're asking what is the center of enlargement. So at what point, what is the midpoint on which the A changed its shape into an enlargement and became shape B, a completely new shape in a way, similar shape, but in the bigger version, which is also known as the enlargement. Okay. So basically what we do here, it's a simple method. this point and this point, this point and this point, this point and this point. We see these 3 points very, very clearly on the triangle, so we mark them up. And what we basically do next is we make sure that these lines, we make a line between them. So basically we make a line like this and make sure that it reaches a point where it can stop. Let's say over here, right? So basically these lines are straight. I would prefer if you would use a scale for this to get a more accurate answer and to get more like straightforward and clean answer so that examiners find it impressive and give you a mark straight away. So this point to this point, we know it's going through this and this because these are the same points in the triangle. This is what we do to find the center of enlargement. Now we know this point and this point are the same. So we basically put a straight line, pass through it, and make sure it touches here. Now we see that the line is too big here, the first one, which we did from here to here. So you can erase it a little bit and make it the similar length where it's touching. So we know this one was a little bit long over here. This one was a little bit long over here. In a way, a triangle. And then the last point, we need to make sure that this one also passes through this line as well. This one passes through this one. So we make a line and we land it over here. So now what we can see is we have these 3 lines which are coming to a straight point without us even considering that, oh, it's going to come to the middle. So this is where, this point is where we consider the center of enlargement. And we can mark this, suppose, as X, for suppose. And this we can clearly state, because this told us to mark X, we marked X, which clearly means this will be our center of enlargement. So we don't need to write any answers here. We simply need to show it through this diagram, not too complex, basically taking the same points and passing a line through them to the end. And then when we know where it is a particular point where all 3 of these are meeting, we circle it or we simply mark it X like they said, and that will be our answer. That's how you gain a mark. Okay. So now let's move on to the next question. So they say that here are 2 parallelograms on a coordinate grid. Parallelogram D is a reflection of parallelogram C. So B, first part. On the grid, draw the mirror line. Write down the equation of this mirror line. So we clearly know a mirror line basically means drawing a division between them. So when we know we need to draw a division, it will simply be, mirror is simply like dividing it into 2. So we should know that whenever we are dividing, it should be at a very equal range and should come in from the axes. So basically what we do here is we take this point, and then we put a line between them. Please use a scale for this as well to get an accurate straight line, which basically means this is a reflection here. Now they're saying, so you'll earn a mark for this already. So the next thing is write down an equation of the mirror line. So we basically know that here we're on the both x-axis and y-axis. We know this is the x-axis, we know this is the y-axis, we know that it's on both, wherever this line is touching. So we can basically say whatever line we have drawn which is straight up is touching both y and x. So we can clearly say that y is equals to x. And that will be your equation of your mirror line. And that's how you will earn another mark. Perfect. So now when we move on to the next question, now it's a different one. So now your question basically is, Alina spent 120 minutes at a sports center. She played badminton for 50 minutes. She used the swimming pool for 1/6 of the 120 minutes. She used the gym for 20% of the 120 minutes. Then she spent the rest of her 120 minutes in the cafe. Work out the total time in minutes that Elena spent in the cafe. Okay, so this is rather it's full of different division, multiplication, fractions. So obviously this is something rather simple, to think about okay, but at the same time, you need to think that it can be tricky because sometimes you might not find the exact value or sometimes leave a few points. So because the question, when you read it, it's a bit tricky. But let me tell you, some of these methods, when you read it out as a separate question, you already know that it's a very simple question. We can solve these steps, gain the most marks. But at the same time, it is important to find the answer. So no matter how much you've solved, suppose this part, we already know that you're going to gain marks here for sure. But I want you to get full marks. I want you to get a 4 out of 4. So how will you do that and complete this whole question? So that's the main important thing. So firstly, if some people are not already familiar with this question, about how to solve this question firstly, take these questions as separates. Okay? So firstly, when we read the question again, Elena spent about 120 minutes at a sports center. She played badminton for 50 minutes. She used the swimming pool for 1/6 of the 120 minutes. So here we know already, when we see this part, we already know that we can solve it, right? How can we solve it if you take it as a simple question? We can just take the part 1/6 of the 120 minutes. What we can simply write? We can simply write 1/6 of 120. Now what does of mean here? Of simply means multiply. So when you do that, we basically know that 120 multiplied by 1 is basically 120, and 60 stays as 60. Now we can see that it's 120 over 60. What do we do now? Now it's simply divide, because we know that it's written in a fraction. So basically means now we have to divide. So 120 over 60, we cross these zeros out. We know 6 2s are 12. 6 into 2 is 12. We write 2. And also, there might be a number wrong here. So we correct this mistake first. It is not supposed to be 60. It's supposed to be a 6. So now if we correct our mistake, we basically know 120 over 6. So we know now that it will be 6 into 2 is 12. And now we're left with a 0. That will be a 0 here. So basically we know that 6 into 20 is 120. And that will be your answer for this one, for the first part. And this is the time she took in the swimming pool. So we can write swimming pool, SP. The first part is done. We ticked it off already. Moving on to the next part, already on 1 mark, which is good. Second mark we get is for thinking that then she used the gym for 20% of the 120 minutes. So this can be done in the 2 methods. I think the first method is very much clear. People can use this one as well. We already know that 20% is equals to 20 over 100. So we can also do 20 over 100 into 120. And we basically get this answer. It's the simplest method, but the other method is also that I think I can speak it really well. If you still don't understand it, please let me know. I can always show it to it in another shot, or I can show you to here if you want me to. So basically it could be the other method. I'm gonna write it at the top over here. So the another method that is that firstly you can do 10% of 120, which would basically give you a 12, and then you could do 20%. And basically multiply 12 into 2, which gives you a 24. You can always pause this video to answer this or to note this down. Whichever method feels good to you is perfectly fine. Both ways you gain a mark. None of them are wrong. None of them are shortcuts. None of them are, oh, she didn't do a step or she missed this step. They're perfectly fine. You gain marks in both ways. Okay, so I'm going to erase this now. If you want to note this down, please pause the video. Okay, so now I'm going to erase this. So now that we've gone with the other method, which I find much easier from my side, we got the answer of a 24. 2 marks already gained. Now we're left with 3 marks. The third mark and the fourth mark. So when we see the third mark, which is up here, if you can see, we already know, we've got the answer that she took around 20 minutes for swimming. Then she took about 24 minutes for her gym. So what we can clearly do here, and then she played badminton for 50 minutes as well. That's a separate point, but that's a common point. Nothing to solve here. This is basic information. So we know this, and we know this. So we know almost the overalls. So what we can firstly do is we can add the ones that we have got, right? So that in the end, we can find out how much time is left, which is basically the time she has spent in the cafe, because it clearly says she then spent the rest of the 120 minutes in the cafe. So when you read the sentence, please don't get confused. It doesn't mean that she spent a whole of another 120 minutes. They are mentioning the exact 120 minutes in which for 50 minutes she played badminton, for 20 minutes she did swimming, and then for 24 minutes she used the gym. So in those minutes, the rest of the time that she had, she spent it in the cafe. But how much time? That's the thing that we need to find, which will give us the fourth mark. So for that, our third step would be adding up these, so that in the fourth step we can subtract it from the mean, which is subtracted from the 4, which is 120, and get our answer. So when we add this up, we know it's a 50. Our new value is a 20. And then our new value again, our solved value is again 24. We add these up, 50 plus 20 plus 24. I'm going to write it in a more neat way because then it's a bit hard to see and then the numbers get a bit confusing. So third point, we know 50 plus 20 plus 24. Basically get an answer of 94. Right? So when we get an answer of 94, our fourth step is of course minusing, basically subtracting 120 from 94, which simply gives us 26, which is basically the rest of the time that she spent in the cafe. And we write this answer here as well. Oops, 26 minutes. Let me write that again. And that's it. That's how you will earn all the marks. Super simple. And even if you're confused, always take some of these as a separate question. Like when you already know, you read through the question, you're confused, please take these type of questions as separate so that you can solve them separate. And even though you don't gain full marks on here, suppose you earn 2 or 3, the way that you'll earn 2 or 3 or even a 1 is by solving these separately. Because separately, there are also questions that you need to solve in a way. And the way of solving these things is to start with these. And then obviously, if you understand it more, if you're clear with the topic, if you're confident, you can always go further, solve the whole question, and of course, gain your full 4 marks. But still, if you're very, very confused, it is super important to do the ones you already know, or you have a good idea of, you're familiar with, write something. And in that way, you can at least earn a mark or 2, which is basically good because at least you earn some mark rather than leaving it blank. So that's the best way of solving this type of questions. And then the next question is, Elena got to the sports center at 1:30 p.m. She asked her friend to meet her in the cafe at 3 p.m. Did Elena get to the cafe at 3 p.m.? So now they've given us a statement, right? So the statement basically is, let me repeat this again. So Elena got to the sports center at 1:30 p.m. Then after that, she asked her friend to meet her in the cafe at 3 p.m. Did Elena get to the cafe by 3 p.m.? So you basically need to check if she got to the cafe by 3 p.m. Now how do we do that? So we basically know that 1:30 p.m. Now we've got the time 1:30 p.m. here, 3 p.m. here. We don't need 3 p.m. here right now because that will be our end answer to check that did she reach by 3 p.m. So to check, we already know a total by already her previous activities and not considering the answer we just found, 26 minutes. Considering all her other activities, we know that she took 94 minutes for her other 3 activities, right? So what we can basically do here is, firstly, we've got 94 minutes. So firstly, because it is much easier sometimes to convert it into an hour and minutes, so like basically 1 hour 20 minutes, 1 hour 30 minutes, into firstly convert it into hours so that it gets much easier for you. You can always keep it into minutes if you want to. That's your choice. That's completely your choice because it's a 1 mark question. So they basically are more focused on the answer than the converting scheme. And if it was a 2 marker, it would be super important to convert 94 minutes into an hour. So when we convert 94 minutes into an hour, it basically gets us to 1 hour 34 minutes. This is what it gets us. So what we basically do is we take 1:30 p.m. and then after that we add up 1 hour 34 minutes, which basically says 3:04 p.m. Now when we look at the question, it says that did Elena get to the cafe by 3 p.m. Now she in a way did, but we can't consider it in a way because we need an accurate answer. If it clearly said 3 p.m., if it clearly converted, if it was 90 minutes, it clearly would have converted into 1 hour 30 minutes, and in that way we would have got the answer of 3 p.m. But no, she took an extra of 4 minutes, which clearly means they're asking for 3, she reached at 3:04. Therefore, no, she did not. She did not what? She did not reach the cafe by 3 p.m. Simple, straightforward, you earn a mark. And this question was about 5 marks. So in this way, by very simple calculations, by very simple consideration of firstly following the question, so basically solving parts of it, as much as you know, solving one part, second part, and as much as you're familiar with it as you know, you can earn the simplest of marks. Even if you get 2 out of 4, 3 out of 4, that will make sense because in a way you've made an effort. And still, the most important thing in these questions, always and always, I will repeat it again, is to take these questions separately, because in a way they're also testing you on your fraction skills. 1/6 of the 120 minutes. 1/6 is a fraction. So how are you going to do 1/6 of? Of basically means multiply by 120. So you simply write 1/6 multiplied by 120. You multiply 120 by 1. And then it goes over 6, and then you divide 120 over 6, which basically gets you an answer of 20. So that's how they test you. So it is important to consider them as separate questions so that you don't get confused as overalls and you can earn at least a few marks, if not full. Okay. Next question. Now we're on the 13th question. Okay. So here, it's more about looking at the graph. Right. So here, we can always consider different colors if possible. So the composite bar chart shows information about the number of people living in a village. Now they've given this graph about the number of people and the year. The years they've given us is 2000, 2010, 2020. They've given us a pattern saying that these are the children's population. This is the population of children living in the village, population of women in the striped, the striped design, and then men in completely black color. Okay, so now the first question that is given to us is write down the number of men living in the village in the year 2000. So here what we can clearly do is that I don't think we need to calculate anything. So straight away, firstly we know 2000 is here. We need to calculate the number of men. So she's basically asking us. So she or the question is basically asking us to calculate the men. So this is the men. All of this is the men. All of this. So the tip here, we see that which line is it going through. Now this is not the most accurate line, not the most straight line because of the color or the pen I'm using right now. So it is always important to use a scale and draw an accurate line. So by what I'm seeing right now is between a 0 and 100. So I would say probably 50 would be probably a little bit below here, I think. Probably a point away or like somewhere over here. So I can basically say by my calculation, by my thinking, I would probably say this is a 60 in my opinion. Now, it is super important to use a scale so that you can get a more accurate result. Now, because of my thinking, I think that, you know what, it is below, I think the half of 100 is basically a 50, right? So I would basically look at the middle. So I know it's almost in the middle. So like it's there, but like it's a little bit above the middle. So I can say if this is 50, if this line is 50, if I draw a straight line over here, like a little bit in the middle, of course, that's little bit messy. So I know in a way that the place where I'm marking is probably above a 50, and I can clearly say that it might be a 60 or a 70 or a 80, but it doesn't look close to 100 if it was a 70, 80 or 90. So for that reason, I'm clearly writing for now that it is a 60. Okay. But it is always important for you to use the scale on this to get a more accurate result. Because they might accept 2 over or 2 below, but at the same time, it is super important to use the cell to get a very accurate result of having a 60 or a 70 or a 80. It could be any number. But this is the most accurate I could get. Okay, so the next question is, find the number of children living in the village of year 2010. Now we're on the 2010 now, as you can see. Now here, we can clearly see, here are the children, right? So here we see the tip. We can basically see the tip. But here it does not mean, now we can clearly see the tip and draw a line and think that, oh no what, it's 200 and, let's say 210. So we can write 210. No, that's completely wrong method. Because we clearly know here that only, so let me erase the tick as well. So here we only know that we are considering only this part because the rest part is of women and men. We cannot consider that as a whole because they're just asking us for children and only this part is for children. So please focus on that as well. Now we need to measure the length of this. So we can go, let's say, a line here. So you can basically say, so what we can basically use these lines for is we can go here, we can go further here, we can go on the lowest point and we can consider the highest point as well. So simply writing 210 is not going to be super accurate, it's not going to be accurate at all because that's not what they're asking us. That's kind of like the total of children, women, men, because that's like almost the whole population because children is on the tip. So we can clearly say 210 and that won't get you a mark. So firstly, what we really do is consider the lowest point of children and the highest point of children. Here, we can see that the above one was 210 and below we clearly know and we can clearly see in a way that it's 160. So what we can do is subtract them and find the real number of the real population of children, which is basically a 50. And for that is what we're going to gain a mark for. So if we simply write, okay, 210, that wouldn't be right because you're in a way sort of saying that, you know what, the number of children are 210, but they're actually not. It's only that bracketed part. That's the only number of children. They can't be that many. And reading it from the top basically means that you're reading in a way the whole population, which is clearly wrong. And it's not something that they have asked for in the second question, in the B part. Okay. Next question is, for the people living in the village in the year 2020, find the ratio of the number of children to the total number of men and women. When they say 2, basically means ratio. So whenever we see 2, we basically say it could be a ratio question. Okay. So they're saying find the ratio for the number of children to the total number of men and women. So we basically know in the year 2020, when we see the number of children, suppose we can clearly see if we draw a line here. We don't draw a line here, that's the wrong method. When we see the number of children here, so we know the lowest point and the highest point, as I again told you. Lowest point, highest point. If we subtract those numbers from the high and the low, so we basically, if I draw a more accurate line, let me erase this one. I would say it's probably around okay. So if we calculate, so I think I've got it. So if we calculate the highest point here in children, over here, only this part we are considering it now. So if we calculate the highest point here and the lowest point here, you should be getting an answer of 80 children. And that's how we calculated the previous question. So basically we calculate from the high and low points, subtract them, 80 children, we clearly know already. That's your 1 mark. And then we know that we've already been given in a certain way. We can always find out that as well. So women and men, similar method, consider all of this, do it separately, women and men. Then whatever answer you get, you need to add them up, right? Because they're only asking for women and men add. So we can add women and men, and that is giving me around 200 men and women. And women. And in this way, we clearly know, because we've got the number of children and we've got the number of men and women together, we can write it as a ratio. So when we write this as a ratio, we know first they're asking for children. So we write 80 ratio number of men and women together 100. 200. That's it. You can always simplify it, but simplifying is not really needed here, because the main steps where you had to gain a mark was to realize that firstly, this method that we've done before in the previous question had to be done again, but for all three, and recognizing that we have to do this in 2020. So we check the 2020, we do the highest, lowest of children, women, men. We subtract them from each other, not together. We subtract for children's otherwise, which is like otherwise by meaning like separately. Then for women, we do it separately. For men, we do it separately. Then for the answer we got for men and women, we add them up because that's what they said in the question to the total number of men and women, because that's what they're asking for. So we add men and women, and we've got the number of children as well now. So now that we've got them, they're simply asking us to find the ratio. So simply means that the order that they've told us to write the ratio in, we know firstly they're asking for the number of children. So the number of children are 80, we wrote 80, and then ratio point, and then the total number of men and women were 200, so we wrote 200, and that's how it was done. You can always simplify it, but that's not what that was not the main reason for this question. Okay. Now we're on the 14th question. Now here we clearly know it's a time question, it's a speed question, it's a distance question when we start reading it. So when we start reading the 14th question, it says that Jenny drives from London to Swindon at an average speed of 54 miles per hour. She drives for 1.5 hours. Work out the distance from London to Swindon. So this is a very rather like simple question. How? Let me explain this to you. Now we clearly know that we've been given. So firstly what we can write is distance, speed, and time, because I think it makes it so much easier for people to firstly write what they've been given, and then they can solve it, and in that way they can get a more sort of accurate answer and a correct answer, because sometimes people just start solving and then they get confused what was the previous value, what to do first, what to not. It is always important to write what is given to you. So what is given to you, basically distance, speed, time. So for distance, we've not been given any distance. That's something we have to find in this question, right? Speed, what is the speed given? 54 miles per hour. What is the time given? Time is given of 1.5 hour. So we can also say that 1.5 hour is equal to 1.5, right? 1.5 hours. So now if we solve it, now we've given distance, speed, time. So we've been given speed and time. Firstly, if you find it confusing, we can the first ever step that we can do is write the formula of distance, speed, and time. What is the formula of speed? Distance over time, right? Now that we have this formula, we already know the speed we've got the time, we haven't got the distance. We can substitute them. So speed is a 54, distance we don't know. We can write distance as x because that's what we need to find. And then time is 1.5. Now, when we know that x is over 1.5, 1.5 has to go to the other corner to get the value for x. So when it goes to the other side, what was the rule again? That whenever any number goes to the other side of the equals to sign, this is an arrow, so it's probably a little bit wrong because it might get you all confused. So I'll write this. So whenever it goes to the other side, it basically changes their sign. So right now, if it is in division, right now x over 1.5. So when 1.5 goes to the other side of the equals to sign, it will change into multiplication. So now we clearly write 54 multiplied by 1.5 gives you x. So when we multiply 54 into 1.5, it gives us an answer of 81. Okay. This is what your answer is. Your answer is 81. So first point that you really get the first mark that you really get is for finding out the speed. After finding out the speed, the second mark what you get for is rearranging and then knowing that if it's in divide right now, it would go to the other side and change into multiplication. Multiply that, your answer, that will be your second mark. Okay. So let's move on to the next question. So Alexei is using a map. The map has a scale of 1:25,000. On the map, a road has a length of 6 centimeter. Work out the length in kilometers of the real road. Okay, so when we know that we've been given a scale of 1:25,000 and the length of 6 centimeter. So when we know that we're given for 6 centimeter a scale, because this is the main number, this is your main length. So if it's given for 6 centimeter, if for 1 it is like 25,000 a scale, so what would be for 6 centimeters? They're basically asking. So what we can really do here is multiply. So we do 6 into 25,000. We get an answer of 150,000. And then you can always convert it into, so because we got this answer into centimeter, we convert it into kilometers because they've asked us in kilometers. So firstly, more easier way you can do, firstly convert it into meters, then convert it into kilometers. And that will be your answer. And to convert this very simple rule, we basically did for converting centimeter into meter, we basically did 150,000 divided by 100. And then for the next step, what we did was to convert it into kilometer, 1500 divided by 1000. Simple. And that's how you would get 1.5. And in this way, you will earn all the 3 marks. First marks is for multiplying 6 into 25,000. When we know we've got the answer, that's your first mark. Now that we know that we need to get the answer in kilometers, so it is important that if they're asking for 2 more marks, they're probably asking for a conversion split in a way. So if you straight away convert it into kilometers, it would still give you the whole 2 marks, because you did that big jump by realizing that, okay, that we need to divide by a bigger number of zeros, like could be 1000 or 10,000, to get to an answer of 1.5 kilometer from centimeter to kilometer. It's big difference. So even if you wanted to show these 2 steps from meter to kilometer, that would also give you 2 marks as a whole. So what we really did, it was 15,000 centimeters, we converted into meter, that's your second mark, and then from converting to meter to kilometer, that's another mark, your answer, third mark, full. And that's how you earn a total of 5 marks for the whole 14th question. So moving on to the next question. Now we can see that we've been given coordinates of the midpoint of P and Q. So we've been given a grid basically, which is similar to the ones we've seen in enlargement, or we've basically seen in the topic called transformations. So here they're saying that find the coordinates of the midpoint of P and Q. So by midpoint, they basically mean their middle point. But I personally think it wouldn't be so accurate. And by personally, not even personally, but mathematically, it wouldn't be correct. Because if you straight away point to 0, because that's certainly for many times you'll find these questions, and you'll always think that, oh, 0, 0, something like that would be super common and super centered. Yes, that is a center, but that's not what they're asking. They're not asking about what's the center, like what's the equation. Suppose it was like y is equals to x, those kind of things where we know it's the center and simple common equation, and that's how you'll earn a mark. We've got this question for 2 marks first of all, so it is important to rethink this question. And we simply know here that we've been given 2 points. How to find a midpoint? So what we can really do here is either we can see the coordinates. Suppose this is a 2, 4, Q is a 2, 4, and then P is a -3 and -2. That's also somewhere where you can solve. There's also something that you can, like, take the coordinates maybe and then minus them out, or take out the gradient and all of that. But that's a too long method. It takes way too much time. So my opinion is, first of all, the easiest of method is that you join this. You take a scale. Mine wouldn't be so accurate. Mine would be a little bit wiggly. So you basically join P and Q. See, I told you it's a bit wiggly. So please use your scale whenever you do this. So P and Q. We have a scale here, so we can try. Sometimes the scale doesn't get removed out of my screen presenting, so it might be a little bit of a problem for now. So if we just change the shape, change the angle, I mean, and we straight away a bit more. Okay. Okay, one more time. Okay, this should work. It's not super accurate for some reason, but I'll try. Get a little bit more, maybe tilt is needed. That makes sense maybe. So if I just take a pen, draw a straight line here, and then I just leave the scale, it might not go so easily. So I just try to put the scale away. Okay, so I told you it might not be the easiest task to get the scale away, but still, I think I've got it handled now. So I think the scale is gone now. Okay, so as we can see, we've drawn a straight line. I couldn't do this in the earlier ones because I thought the scale wouldn't go. It sometimes happens. So as we know that the scale thing is now gone, obviously. So now I can use scale in many of my calculations. So as we can see, now we've drawn a straight line between P and Q. We can find the place. So now we know that the midpoint on this one is over here, clearly, right? So what we really need to do here is we need to count where are we pointing here. So here we're basically pointing somewhere over here on this point. And now we know when we see the other line, the straight one, the vertical one, it's simply pointing over here, somewhere over here, right? So here when we basically measure the y line and the x line, so whenever we see the y line, we know that the point where it's the center of P and Q, we know that this point is a 1, which is basically a y coordinate. So we write 1 here. And when we see our x, we can see it's between 0 and -1. So basically it would be a minus 0.5 because it's in the middle of 0 and -1. And that would be our coordinates, 2 marks. So first mark would be for knowing that it wouldn't be simply 0, 0 or any other coordinate. First step, what we really need to do is we have to join these lines firstly with the scale to get an accurate result. So join this with the scale. Now we simply know by common sense that okay, we need a middle point. We know this is in the middle. Simply, we know this is in the middle of Q and P. We mark this middle point. Now we see that on this middle point, what point is it connected to? So like what point is it connected to? At what point, at what number is it landing on the x line and on the y line? Which is basically your answer, which is basically your x and y coordinates. So we need to see the coordinates we're on. So we put our finger down for the x one. We can see it's between 0 and -1, 0.5, minus 0.5. And then for y, when we can clearly see it's on 1. So we write the y coordinate as 1. Your second mark. Super simple. It's just that you need a scale for a very accurate answer here. And need to know whenever you need to find the midpoint and you're given these 2 points, it's important to firstly join the line and then tap on a midpoint, tap on where you think it's the middle proper. With a scale, firstly draw a line, get a midpoint, measure the coordinates and write it down. Simple, 2 marks, full 2 marks. And there's nowhere in here where you can get your marks cut off unless you didn't use a scale for this one. Because it's super crucial to use scale for this one to get accurate result, always. Okay, so now we're on the 16th question. So now when we see the 16th question, here is a quadrilateral of A, B, C and D. So now we can see a shape of quadrilaterals and its sides. So all the measurements are in centimeters. The perimeter of ABCD is 52 centimeters. Work out the length of DC. Okay, so now we're on another question, question 16. And now it is basically about the shapes. And the perimeter and area. This is the chapter related to that. So all the measurements are in centimeters, as we can see. The perimeter of ABCD, so perimeter meaning that this whole shape is basically 52 centimeters as a total. Work out the length of DC, and now they've asked a particular length, which is basically this one. How do we find it? So now, by putting a little bit of a common sense thing in, we can basically see that the perimeter they're saying is basically around it, and around it we've given these coordinates, not coordinates. So around them we've been given certain numbers and algebras together. So obviously we know x is something that we definitely need to find, so that in the end we can multiply it by 2 because that's the side that they're asking for. So what do we really need to do here? So what we really need to do here now is that because we know that these sides are also the perimeter in a way, because these add up to get the perimeter, right? So we can clearly write the numbers 2x minus 5 plus x plus 1 plus x minus 1 plus 2x is equal to a 52, because when you add these up, you clearly know that's your total perimeter. Okay, so now we clearly know it's a 52 and we've got these values. So what we can simply do is either we can collect the like terms. So when we collect the like terms, we get an answer. When we collect the like terms of the x's, we clearly get a 6x. When we do normal numbers together, we get an answer of minus 5, which is equals to 52 again. Now we've got a rather simple equation. So what we can simply do is we can leave the x alone. Now how do we leave the x alone? Now we've got an equation of 6x minus 5 is equals to 52. So we take minus 5 into the other direction. Now we know it's a minus 5 will change into a plus 5 because it's going on the other side of the equals to sign. So 6x is equals to 52 plus 5. 6x is equals to 57. And then we know to leave the x behind, this is in multiply. 6 and x are together because they've been multiplied, right? So 6 and x. So when we know now, right now 6 is in multiply. So when it goes to the other side, it will be in division. So x is equals to 57 over 6, which will simply give us 19 over 2, as in the most simplified version. And now that we know what is DC, DC we know are given as 2x. Now because we're given it as 2x, we found the value of x. So what do? We do 19 over 2 multiplied by 2, this. Now that we know 2 and 2 are in the same table, are in a more form of division right now when we write it down like this. So we can cross these out, take them as 1. 19 into 1 is 19. Therefore, this length of DC would be a 19 centimeters. Simple. So basically, the mark you really gained, the marks you really gained, firstly, the first 3 marks for is firstly 1 point recognizing that, okay, all of these must add up to a 52. Why? Because they're asking us for the perimeter. By perimeter mean the outside shape of this. And by outside shape, they've given us these certain lengths, which is like x plus 1, 2x minus 5, 2x. Firstly, we know we need to find x. Second, we know that because they've given us these outsides and they've said that the total already is 52, then how would it be x? So we can clearly write that, okay, adding all these numbers up is equals to a 52. And that's how, firstly, when you go along these steps, you go down, you collect the like terms, you collect the x's on one side, you collect the normal numbers on the other side, you solve it, you get a 6x minus 5 is equals to a 52. Now that we've come across a more simpler equation, we solve it, we get the x, that's your another 2 marks. We get x is equals to 9. Okay, so this question is quite tricky because as it is about probability, I think a lot of students find it a lot more confusing to understand probability itself. So I firstly want you to try answering this question yourself for a minute or two, and then after that we can discuss and then we can sort out the answers whether it is wrong or right. But even if you can't think of anything, I still want you to write something or anything that you know about probability. So I'm going to give you guys a minute. Sort this out as much as you can. If you already know the answer, that's perfect. You can write it down and check if it's right and wrong in a minute with me. So you've got a minute, guys. Okay guys, I'm back, and also I've taken the water break as well. So when we return back to question 17, now I'm going to discuss the answers with you guys. So the question is, there are only blue counters, green counters, red counters and yellow counters in a bag. The table shows the number of blue counters in the bag. They've given us a small table where they've given us the first point of the colors and the second point of the number of counters. They've already given us the number of blue counters already. So now we've given a question that there is a total of 100 counters in the bag. Ashin takes at random a counter from the bag. Find the probability that the counter is not blue. So when we know a total, always consider a total as 100. So whenever you're doing probability, always consider a total of 100 unless you've already been told that okay, these are the number of total counters. So we consider that total as 100. Right? So now that we've given this as 100, what we can really do is find the probability that it is not blue. Now blue is a 30. We have a total of 100. So how many would not be blue? Green plus red plus yellow. Now because we've not been given the value of green, red and yellow, and we already have the value of blue, and they have said that it is not blue. So what we can basically do is subtract 100 from a 30, and all the others would not be blue then. So 100 minus 30 is a 70. So we probably know that if we know the probability is something we need to write in fractions. So we know at least 70 out of 100 counters would not be blue. Simple, you already gained 2 marks there. First mark for doing 100 minus 30. Secondly, for writing the answer in the probability form as it was asked. Okay. Next question is, the ratio of the number of blue counters to the number of green counters is 2:3. Work out the number of green counters in the bag. So now we've given the ratio of 2 to 3, and now we need to find the green ones. Now we already know that the blue ones is a 30. So it's again very useful. So firstly, if we write 2:3, blue, green. Now we already know that for blue, we know it's already a 30, right? So if blue is 30, how much is green? So firstly, we see the difference of 2 and 30. So how much did we multiply to 2 to get 30? We multiplied it by a 15. We see the difference between those two, because already when we know we've given this probability, we've given this ratio, and we already know that blue is a 30. What we can do is find the difference. So when we found the difference, we already know that we multiply 2 to 15 to get 30. And if you feel confusing to find it by mind and being like, okay, what do I multiply by 2 to get 30? It might take a few minutes up. So by not taking a few minutes up, what you can do is divide 30 by 2, and the answer is 15. So we can simply write 2 multiplied by 15 is equals to 30. So if 2 multiplied by 15 gives us 30, in the same way, we need to multiply green also by 15. So we multiply green by 15. So 3 multiplied by 15, which gives us a 45. Therefore, we know that we have 45 green counters and 30 blue counters. And now because they've only asked us for the green counters, we're going to write the answer of the green counters. So we know that it's green. So for green, we know that it is now a 45 counters. Okay, so I hope this question is clear to you guys. The next question is, Bradley says the number of red counters in the bag is the same as the number of yellow counters in the bag. Can Bradley be correct? Give a reason for your answer. So here we know the number of red counters in the bag is the same as the number of yellow counters in the bag. How can we check? Now we haven't been given any data of how many green. Now we know green is already a 45, so we can write 45. We don't know what's red, we don't know what's yellow. So the number that we've already been given, we can already find out how many yellow counters could there be or how many red counters could there be. Might be an equal value if we take x and all the other methods, but it's not something we need to put on right now. Right now, we just need to check if the red counters in the bag is the same as the yellow counters. So when we do this, firstly what we can do is, we know 100 is the total. We can subtract it from 30, we can subtract it from 45, get a number that we know are similar to either yellow or red. So when we subtract this, 100 minus 30 minus 45, we basically get an answer of 25. So now we know that the same number of, so the number of red counters in the bag is the same number of yellow counters in the bag. We can't say that they are the same. You know why? Because we clearly know when we got an answer of 25 and when we half it, because that's what will be the value of red and yellow, right? So when we half it, it gives us an answer of 12.5. So it clearly means that there are 25 red and yellow counters, and because 12.5 is not a value which is acceptable, 12.5 is not, so it cannot be 12.5, because we cannot say that, oh, that like, so like basically if we think about it, okay, something of a half, there can be 1.5 counter. No, there cannot be. So always for this answer, we should know that the answer should be as a whole. So if it was a 12, we would have said that, you know what, yes. But because they've given us 12.5, we can clearly say that no, there are 25 red and yellow counters, and there cannot be 12.5 of each. It's basically not possible to have 12.5 of counters. They must be whole numbers. And that's it. That's how you earn your 1 mark. Okay, so for now we have done till question 17. I hope these ones were clear to you guys. There will also be a part 3 coming up. Now we're on the 8th question. So for the next day of our next video, we'll be covering from 18th to 26th. So I hope this one was clear to everyone. I hope you like this video. Please like and subscribe. And please let me know if there's any other video you would like me to do after part 3. And I would love to go through all the questions with you guys, make a video, and make sure you understand each and every topic and earn the most marks, and also are super familiar with the exam techniques. Thank you guys.